Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our weekly study as we are in the book of Judges, chapter 3. And I hope you are enjoying this. This is, of course, very interesting as we watch the ups and downs of Israel in their relationship with God. Of course, none of that would apply to us today, right? None of us bounce up and down or go up and high and low and things like that. Of course, we know that that is true in many of our cases, many of my life too. So as we continue reading here, we are in the 12th verse of the third chapter, and it says, the children of Israel, of course, did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord strengthened this guy named Eglon. I thought this was kind of interesting. Eglon was the king of Moab, and the Moabites had been defeated by Israel, but somehow he was strengthened by the Lord. I wonder how this occurred. Did his numbers of camels and infantry and men and weapons suddenly multiply? Did they become better trained? Somehow the Moabites had to become stronger than what the Israelites were. Or was it that, as maybe the Jewish commentators might think, that because of the evil that Israel did, they became weaker and they became compromised in their ability to do battle? And so, very interesting to try to decipher this and look at how did Moab become stronger than Israel when before Israel was stronger and had expelled Moab. Um, and either way, it occurred because of the evil that the children of Israel had done. And so he gathered unto him the children of Ammon and Amalek. So maybe this was another factor involved here, is he had to form an alliance with the Ammonites and the Amalekites. And so maybe this alliance never existed before, and that the Lord allowed him to create this alliance that would then strengthen him. And they went and smote Israel and possessed the city of palm trees. And so what's interesting here is when I look at the map, the city of palm trees is Jericho. And so you can see where my cursor is on the map here. You'll see the land of Jericho. What's interesting about Moab is they are really separated from Israel by the Dead Sea. They have no bordering land. But the Ammonites did, which are over here to the right, and the Amalekites, which are down in the lower left. This was like a three-pronged spear advancement here. And so the Moabites must have gone around through the land of Reuben and Benjamin, and then come in over the north side of the Dead Sea. You also see that this map does list the deliverers or judges that God used, and Ehud, who we're about to learn about, who was called to be this deliverer, was from Gilgal, which is right by Jericho. So all of this happened right in his backyard, if you will, and so he was really close here. And but look at the time frame. The other part I want to bring out here is the city of palm trees, which is Jericho. Just going to take a quick look at uh, the book of Joshua, because Joshua had something really, really strong to say about anybody who would go back to that. And so looking at chapter 6, verse 26, I just thought it'd be poignant to read that today, because it is a very stark warning on what would happen to anybody, which in this case it was the Israelites. So in verse 26, and please forgive the Hebrew here, I'll just read the transliteration underneath. And Joshua charged them at the time, saying, "Cursed be anybody from Yahweh who rises up and builds this city Jericho," talking about firstborn slain, again, child sacrificed, and his child shall be set up within its gates. And so this is a very, very stark warning here that no one should be going into Jericho and ever rebuilding it. But somehow it was rebuilt. And maybe that's why God moved upon the king here to go and take that city because he had told people not to go there. And so I thought that was very interesting. So just going back to where we were in the verses here, you'll notice again that the word Yahweh is used for strengthening King Eglon. Yahweh, of course, as we know, is the passionate, merciful side of God. And of course, it might be challenging for us to think, why is the compassionate name of God used here when he's putting them into bondage for 18 years? I heard actually it was a Jewish rabbi mentioned about this, that to the untrained who is watching a surgeon, if he didn't know what a surgeon was doing and why he was cutting with the knife, he would just see someone with a knife beginning to, in his mind, inflict harm on a person by cutting into his skin, not aware that the surgeon was going to inside to actually help the person by removing a tumor or something that was harming them. And so many times we may have that same limited viewpoint, that we don't know what God is doing, but yet to us it may appear harmful, it may appear totally in a wrong direction, but because we don't know the entire circumstance, we may have a wrong viewpoint. Just like here, it appears that God is extending his mercy to them by allowing them to be chastised, and the form of chastisement is to go into this oppression. And what I find interesting here is that this oppression lasted 18 years. Again, the last time we looked at, the previous time they went into their servitude or oppression, there was a quite a long period of time. And again, we don't know uh, when they started crying out. Again, you get almost the impression that it took 18 years before they started crying out to the Lord, because the verse here in verse 15 says that they cried out to the Lord, and it looks like the Lord answered their prayer immediately after they cried out. We don't know the time frame. We don't know if that's the case or not. Maybe you know, what percentage of the population cried out 18 years prior, and did it take 18 years for the majority of the population to finally get the picture and begin crying out to the Lord? Was there a majority that arose where before it was a minority? We really don't know. But I want to take a look at verse 15. There's just some really interesting things in here about this guy that the Lord chose. And so again, verse 15, it says that they cried unto Yahweh, and Yahweh raised up a deliverer. Please notice the word deliverer is Moshiach, which is where we get the Savior from. And again, in Hebrew, it fits so beautifully with um, Yeshua HaMashiach, our Savior, our Deliverer, Jesus, the Messiah. And so it talks about the person who God raised up. And again, we talked about that last week. How did God do this? What came upon this person as suddenly he had an anointing of God upon him, and strength that he didn't know of, strength of character, and maybe physical strength that he didn't know before. But what's just interesting here is it talks about, we'll read the uh, King James Version. First of all, it says that he was a Benjamite, a man left-handed. And so I thought this was really interesting. Who cares what hand he was? Um, is right hand thought to be stronger and left hand thought to be weaker? But the Hebrew gives us something really interesting, because it doesn't say anything about being left-handed in the Hebrew. What's also interesting here is he comes from the tribe of Benjamin. You'll see as I'm circling this Hebrew in with my cursor here that Benjamin is really a compound word that is pronounced Ben, Hayamin. It means son of my right hand. So Ben is son. Hayamin is right hand. And you'll see the same word down here where it has the yamino. The letters are the same, even though vowels are a little different. The letters are the same. So from a man who is from the tribe of the son of my right hand comes a guy who is left-handed. Well, that's interesting. But why is he left-handed? Here it says that he has a restricted right hand. Um, the translators just took that and left it as, oh, he's left-handed, but that's not what the Hebrew says. It says that he was crippled, he was restricted in his left hand. And if we look at the meaning of the word, his left hand, excuse me, his right hand was shut up and bound, and it's only used 2 times, and it's translated left-handed either time, but that is really not the case. What it's saying is that he had an injury or a deformity, something that restricted his right hand, and so he had to use his left hand. So I guess in the end result, yes, he was left-handed, but it wasn't a something the way we normally think of it. This was caused by his inability to use his right hand, which even adds more to the miraculous scenario here, that here was someone that we would say is somewhat physically challenged. Maybe years ago we'd use the word handicap, but he's definitely operating in a realm that's somewhat restricted, but yet able to do great things for God. So there's a sermon in that story too, I think. And so what's interesting is that he was being used of God. He only had one really strong hand, and God sent him to, they created this ruse that he was going to bring a present to the king Eglon of Moab. But there was maliciousness in this, as we see in verse 16, that Ehud made a dagger, had 2 inches, 2 edges of a cubit's length, and he put it under his raiment upon his right thigh. And I thought this was interesting here is, okay, first of all, a cubit is known to be 18 inches long. It's typically from the tip of your finger to your elbow. That's really pretty long sword to put in your strap onto your leg. So let's look at what the Hebrew says here a little bit. And what I found is that this word to describe the length of first of all, a dagger, there is no separate word for dagger. The word is um, Harev, which is sword or knife, doesn't really distinguish how big it is, but it could be used for sword. But then it goes here and it says the distance um, is a cubit, but it uses a word that is only used once in the Bible, and that is gomed. Normally, amma is the word used for cubit. So this isn't the same word. And so what we look at here is this is a short cubit. It's something from the knuckles of the clenched fist to your elbow. So this makes sense. Now it's a shorter, fits in with the dagger. Of course, you still get the same understanding, but the Bible does clarify that for us. But what's interesting is that he's left-handed, using his left hand, but he puts the dagger on the right thigh. Why would we have to know that information? And, you know, is that what made that difficult? Did it make it difficult or easier for him to reach in and get to it? Or was it because his right side hand was not useful, that when he came into the king and they frisked him down, they only frisked his left side because that would be the most normal way someone would, reach and pull his dagger out of the left side with his hand that was good, and so they didn't think he would dare, hide anything on his right side because he couldn't get at it because his right hand wasn't working. So again, very, very interesting. And so he brought this present to Eglon, king of Moab, and here this Eglon was a very fat man, it said. And when he had made an end to offer the present, he, wanted to get alone with the king and, you know, offer this. present to him. And so obviously no one thought anything of it. Verse 19 is kind of interesting here. He turned himself again from the quarries. The Hebrew, again clears this up a little bit that this was not a quarry like where they were mining something. These were stone images that had been carved out from a quarry and were put there. So again, you see a little bit of a play on the scenario of what's taking place of the one true God using, Ehud. Um, in the midst of King Eglon, who's serving stone images that are not protecting him, and that his trust in these stone images obviously is not going to protect him from the one true God. And it's a little bit of a showdown here between the false gods and the one true God. So that doesn't show up in English very well. And so he creates this little story, that, oh, I got this special meeting I want to have with you. The king came onto him, which obviously wasn't an easy task because he was very overweight, and he cast everyone out from him. They were just a lot of verbiage as to where they were, setting this scene that you can see them on the rooftop in a summer parlor. Sun is setting, the palm trees are swaying, all tranquil, all calm. Everybody's having a good time. It's a party. He's going to get this special message from God, or his secret errand, a special gift. Everybody's unaware of what's going to happen. And then Ehud takes his left hand, took the dagger from his right thigh, and stabbed the king. And then it gets very, very descriptive. Verse 22, and because this was a blade about 13 inches long, it went in. He was very obese, that the fat of his body enclosed upon the blade and the handle, so he could not pull the dagger out of his belly. And then it says in the King James vernacular, and the dirt came out. Well, how can you not be intrigued by this? Uh, we kind of get a feel for what they're talking about, but let's see what the Hebrew might give us here. A lot of euphemisms, of course, and a lot of things. So here we get to verse 22, and it's so descriptive. It says, and the knife, the dagger went in to his belly and went in even onto the hilt. And then the blade was closed up by the fat over the blade. And then he could not withdraw the dagger out of his belly. And here's where it gets interesting. It says, and came out his entrails. And King James says, and the dirt came out, which is, of course, a euphemism. What's interesting is this word is only used one time in the Bible, and they basically say, we have no clue where it came from. We don't know. And so they say, perhaps it came out his backside, out of his crotch. Um, they say perhaps that, when a person dies, they lose control of their bodily functions, but how would they, he's wearing clothes. Again, that would happen naturally to any person who dies. They lose bodily muscle control. So it's perhaps that this went all the way through him and saw it come out in a place that at least caused them notice. Um, Again, if you think of that, that it would be going in probably at an angle, because I'm sure he aimed for his heart, being the vital organ, and it came out the lower part of his body. And again, why did we need to know all that? Not quite sure, but it is what makes study of the Bible very, very interesting. So we're going to leave you on that cliffhanger. And in fact, we'll leave you for 2 weeks for that, because we don't have class next week, being the um, Labor Day holiday. We don't have class during those weeks. So you have to wait for 2 weeks to find out how this drama ends. And keep this in mind here. And thank you again so much. And God bless you. And we will talk to you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.